It is the second model release of the 2023 Orimeda winter batch. It is RBT06 Hairy Rabbit, with a kit of Pile, Power Hammer, Bug, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Continuous P, which passively buffs his heat stat and overall movement speed every turn an action is completed, making him progressively faster the longer the fight drags on. Now, as another model that was designed exclusively by a fan for a contest and made into an official model, it is nice to see a lot more community involvement on the account of the company Imagineer, and making sure that their community stays involved and engaged by having these contests and releasing more custom models like this. All the same, much like Dead Dog, who is the first model of this initial batch, Hairy Rabbit also will be a spotlight banner and means that he will be available pretty much anytime going forward upon release. But he's packing some very impressive specs and skills under the hood that make him very useful not just to veterans, but also especially to rookies and new players alike. Pile on the head part is a conventional melee skill that has passive pierce damage built in natively, and when you fully cap the part at 5-star, it gains passive defense ignore. That means that the stats you see here are only the base stats and not quite what you'll fully see on the field once he does go in for that headbutt. So he is going to be attacking just a little bit more aggressively thanks to that defense ignore, and a very conventional and well-rounded melee skill you can generally never go wrong with using ever. Power Hammer on the right arm is another conventional melee skill that is a little more on the aggressive side, but also comes with a caveat and a condition. That condition is you deal 1.5 times more damage upon your blow as long as the user's legs are intact. Now this is similar to, of course, say, Power Rifle or something similar to that, which also has the times 1.5 damage bonus, but this one's more focused toward melee fighters. That being said also, you do also have to eat a no dodge and no defend penalty on cooldown, but if you have him covered, he can kind of skirt this moderately easily. Bug on the left arm is his only ailment type skill in his melee-oriented kit, but it is very useful in terms of turn-skipping opponents. That means if he is able to successfully outrun a foe to the center line and inflict them with Bug, he is able to effectively stall their turn and waste their time, meaning they run to the line, do nothing, and turn around and start their cooldown phase right where they left off, making it very good for stalling enemies or even buying yourself a few extra precious seconds to prepare for your team nuke or even offset a potential salvo that threw you off guard. Biped Legs means that he will have very good coverage across all terrains, as bipeds tend to have the best all-round coverage with terrain mastery, and his stats across the board actually aren't too shabby. For a spotlight-based model like him, I'm actually overall impressed with his stat spread. Now, he does still have some notable weaknesses, but he does cover for them moderately well. In terms of armor department, he is a little bit on the lighter end, but still not enough to really count him out in this case. With a head HP of about 3100, a right arm also of 3100, a left arm of about 3k, and his legs also at 3100 means he's packing a pretty healthy 12k overall, which actually is pretty good. It's kind of in that nice little mid-zone of where bots like him really want to be at. His leg stats aren't too shabby either, with a mobility of 821, which means he's going to have a very good base mobility on the field even right from the moment the bell rings. And an evade of 907 isn't too shabby, but he will have a pretty decent time dodging or grazing a lot of low success attacks. A shoot resist of 1199, almost 1200, is pretty solid, and actually kind of strange for a melee fighter like him, because normally fighters that tend to get up close and personal tend to focus more on having a better resistance stats when fighting close range, but instead he has that coverage with long range instead, and inversely actually has a melee resist of 569, which is probably one of his two biggest weaknesses that I see. This does mean that while he is up close and personal, he can deal the hit pretty well, but that does mean he is also going to be taking it. In addition, one of the other big weaknesses I do see of him is with Power Hammer having a success of barely 500. That means it is going to be a very wild right hook, and you're not going to be able to rely on it conventionally unless you inflict the enemy with no dodge or even no defend to make sure that it's the most painful. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I very easily have to rate him an 8.5 out of 10. Despite having a couple shortcomings like his very low melee resist and the very low success on Power Hammer, he is surprisingly well-rounded, and he covers a lot of his weaknesses moderately well by himself on the field. Pile, and even Power Hammer if you hit it, or Bug gives him a very well-rounded kit, so he can alternate between hitting really hard or headbutting you really hard, or focusing more on stalling enemies with turn-skipping tactics. And his leg stats already give him very good base speed as well, not even touching before Continuous P comes in and makes him run even faster the longer the fight drags on. That being said, as mixed parts, I'd very easily have to rate him a 9 out of 10. In some cases, I could even argue a 9.5. Again, even though Power Hammer might be a relatively big shortcoming here, his leg stats are still very well-rounded. Bug and Pile you could never go wrong with using anywhere, especially because both of those are non-heavy. And even if his legs can only support one heavy part, that progressive speed boost over time does also mean that whether you use this rabbit as a mixed parts or as a pure set, he's going to have a very well-rounded and consistent melee performance.